Clara Hayes woke that morning with a soft kind of hope blooming in her chest, the kind she had not dared to feel in years. She was 28 today, and though birthdays had often slipped by unnoticed in her marriage, she convinced herself this one might be different. Maybe Daniel would surprise her. Maybe he would remember that she once loved lilies more than roses, or that her favorite cake was simple chocolate with strawberries on top. As she brushed her hair in the mirror, she told herself that after all the years of distance, of silence that grew heavier between them, he would look at her tonight and see more than just a woman he shared a house with. He would remember she was his wife. The day dragged in small disappointments. No message in the morning, no hurried kiss before he left for the office. She spent the afternoon wandering the apartment, her heart beating faster every time she thought she heard his car in the driveway. By evening, she had set the table with quiet care, lit 2 candles, and smoothed down the pale blue dress he once said made her eyes brighter. The anticipation clung to her like perfume, an anxious, fragile kind of faith. When Daniel finally stepped inside, his suit jacket slung over one arm, Clara almost laughed with relief. He was here, and maybe the tension on his face was just the weight of work. She met him with a smile that trembled at the corners. "Happy you're home. I thought we could have dinner, just us." He didn't return the smile. Instead, his eyes swept across the table, the candles, the hopeful glow on her face, and a muscle tightened in his jaw. He set his briefcase down, straightened, and looked at her in a way that chilled her spine. "Clara," he said, his voice measured, deliberate. "We need to talk." Her breath caught, the phrase every woman dreads, yet she clung to the hope that followed. Perhaps it was about a vacation or children or even a new beginning, but the silence that stretched before he spoke again was heavy, merciless. "I want a divorce." The word struck her like a blade. For a moment she thought she had misheard, that her mind had twisted his words into something cruel. Her birthday candles flickered against the draft of her unsteady breath, and the room seemed to tilt. Divorce?" Her voice cracked, thin and bewildered. "Daniel, today of all days, why would you say this now?" He shrugged, as if discussing a business contract, not the unraveling of vows spoken years ago. "It's overdue. I can't live this way anymore, and frankly, neither can you. I've already spoken with my lawyer." Clara's heart thundered against her ribs. "On my birthday?" The question came out a whisper, thick with disbelief. Tears pressed at the corners of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "You couldn't wait until tomorrow? You couldn't give me one day, just one, to believe we still mattered?" Daniel's gaze hardened. Dragging it out would only be crueler. "I'm in love with someone else. I won't hide it anymore." The admission landed heavier than the word divorce. The man she had once dreamed beside now spoke of another woman as casually as if he were discussing a new suit. Clara's knees wavered, and she gripped the edge of the table to steady herself, her carefully set dinner blurred through her tears. Somewhere deep inside her, a voice whispered that this had been coming for a long time, that the coldness in his eyes was not new, only sharper. Yet the timing, this deliberate cruelty, gnawed at her. Why today? Why in such a way that would forever stain the memory of her 28th birthday? Daniel gathered his jacket, already halfway to the door, leaving her shattered in the candlelight. The flames trembled as if they, too, knew the weight of what had been destroyed. Clara Saint stood motionless, listening to the echo of the door closing behind him. She was left with silence, and with a single, piercing question echoing through her heart. Why now? What was he hiding that he couldn't wait another day to break her? The answer remained cloaked in shadows, but she knew one thing with brutal certainty. Her life had changed forever in the span of a breath, and the man who had once promised forever had just gifted her heartbreak for her birthday. Clara woke the next morning with swollen eyes and a heavy chest that felt as if it could never breathe freely again. The candles from the night before still stood on the table, their wax hardened and crooked, a cruel reminder of what should have been a celebration. She had not slept. Every time she closed her eyes, Daniel's words replayed, slicing her open all over again. Divorce, another woman, and the fact he had chosen her birthday to destroy her life. The city outside was alive with noise. but inside the apartment there was only emptiness. Clara moved mechanically, pouring herself a cup of coffee she could not drink. Her hands shook. It was not just heartbreak. It was humiliation. Everyone would know soon. Friends, family, the neighbors who had seen her smile through years of quiet loneliness. How could she explain that her husband had walked out not because of a fight, but because she was simply not enough for him anymore? That night, Daniel insisted she attend one last dinner together, claiming it was necessary to make the separation look civilized. She should have refused, but something in her still clung to a desperate need for answers. Why now? Why her birthday? Why with such coldness? She agreed, even though her heart begged her to stay hidden away. The restaurant was glimmering with chandeliers and soft music. Clara entered in a plain black dress, hoping to blend into the shadows. She did not expect the cruel twist waiting for her. Daniel was already there, seated proudly with a woman at his side. Not just any woman, the same one whose name had haunted Claire. Rumors whispered among acquaintances. Her face was painted in perfect makeup, her hand possessively on Daniel's arm. They looked like a couple who had been together for years, not days. Clara froze, her stomach tightening. She realized with horror that this dinner was not about closure, it was about spectacle. Daniel wanted her to see his new life displayed in front of her like a trophy. He wanted her to break. She sat down anyway, her throat dry, refusing to let him see her crumble. The waiter poured wine, the music swelled, and Daniel introduced his mistress as though Clara were a stranger at the table. Every word was a knife. She forced herself to swallow them, one by one. Across the room, however, someone else was watching. A man seated alone, his sharp suit catching the light, his eyes steady and observant. He had seen Clara walk in, seen the way her face tightened when Daniel paraded the woman beside him. He had noticed the way her trembling hands tried to hold the glass of water with dignity. Clara felt his gaze only once, a fleeting glance that lingered longer than polite. There was something unsettling about it, not in danger, but in intensity. He looked at her as if he understood every fracture in her heart, as if he could see her tears even when she refused to shed them. When Daniel laughed too loudly at something his lover whispered, Clara excused herself. She walked outside into the cool night air, her chest shaking. The city lights blurred as she finally let a tear slip. She pressed her hand over her mouth to muffle a sob. And then a voice cut through the silence. Deep, calm, and unexpected. He had followed her, the man from the restaurant. His presence was commanding, yet strangely gentle. "I saw your tears," he said softly. "No one should cry like that on their birthday." Clara turned, startled, her heart racing. He stood there in the glow of the streetlight, tall and composed, a mystery written across his features. Before she could respond, he leaned closer, his words carrying a weight that made her knees weaken. "Will you marry me?" The world seemed to pause. Clara's breath caught. For the first time that night, she forgot her pain long enough to wonder who this man was and why he would offer her a promise so wild and impossible. A whisper on the edge of madness, or perhaps the beginning of something she could not yet understand. Clara stood frozen beneath the glow of the streetlight, her heart still aching from Daniel's betrayal, when the stranger's words hung heavy in the night air. "Will you marry me?" It sounded impossible, absurd even, yet there was nothing mocking in his eyes. His gaze was steady, filled with an intensity that unsettled her but also drew her in. She searched his face for cruelty or hidden amusement, but found only sincerity. Her voice trembled as she tried to answer. "Why would you say that to me? You don't even know me." The man's lips curved slightly, not in arrogance, but in something that looked dangerously close to compassion. Sometimes a stranger sees more clearly than those who have lived beside us for years. "I saw the way you held your pain tonight. That strength should not be wasted on a man who parades his betrayal in public." Clara's chest tightened. She wanted to turn away, to retreat from the absurdity of it all, yet she could not move. There was something in his presence that anchored her. Finally, she found her voice again. "Who are you?" "Adrian Blackwell," he replied simply. The name stirred faint recognition. A millionaire investor, a man whispered about in articles she had read once in passing, a man of power, known for his silence as much as his influence. What was he doing here watching her life fall apart? "You don't know what you're saying," Clara whispered, though her pulse raced. "I know exactly what I'm saying," Adrian countered. He yawned, his voice lower now. "I saw a woman abandoned on her birthday. I saw the kind of cruelty a man commits when he thinks you will never rise without him. I don't believe in fate, Clara, but I believe in choices. And I am offering you one." Her name on his lips startled her. She had never told him. She wondered how much he knew, how much he had already seen. Before she could ask, the restaurant doors opened behind her. Daniel's voice sliced through the night, mocking and sharp. "So this is where you ran off to, crying in the street, Clara. Pathetic." Adrian's eyes flickered with a dangerous calm. He did not flinch or step back. Instead, he turned to Daniel, his voice hard as steel. "You should be ashamed. A man who throws away loyalty for vanity isn't worthy of pity, let alone respect." Daniel stiffened, surprised to find another man in the shadows defending her. "And who exactly are you?" "Someone who recognizes value when he sees it," Adrian said, his gaze sliding back to Clara with an intensity that made her heart pound. Daniel sneered and stormed back inside, muttering curses. The air was thick with tension. Clara caught between the ashes of her old life and the strange, overwhelming presence of the man who had stepped into it without warning. "Why would you help me?" she asked finally, her voice breaking. Adrian studied her as though her question carried the weight of the world. "Because I couldn't help the one I lost. And I will not stand by and watch another woman break when I have the power to change it." Clara's breath hitched. His words carried a shadow, a secret wound buried deep. For the first time, she saw not only strength in him, but grief that mirrored her own. The city lights flickered in the distance, and in that moment Clara realized her story was no longer just about loss. A door had opened, unexpected and terrifying, and beyond it stood a man whose offer could destroy her or save her. She did not yet know which, but the suspense of his presence wrapped around her like a storm waiting to break. Clara could not shake the echo of his words, even as the night deepened around her. Adrian Blackwell was not a man who spoke lightly, that much she could tell, and yet the weight of his sudden proposal left her trembling. A part of her wanted to believe it was nothing more than pity, a fleeting gesture from a stranger who happened to witness her worst moment. But the steady fire in his eyes told her otherwise. He was a man with intent, a man who calculated every step before moving, and now his attention was fixed on her. The following day, Clara wandered through her apartment in a haze, Daniel's absence already heavy, though his shadow lingered in every corner. She tried to convince herself that what Adrian had said meant nothing, but by evening, a sleek black car appeared outside her building, its tinted window lowering just enough for her to see his face. Adrian had returned. She hesitated, her hand on the doorknob, her pulse racing with the warning that once she stepped outside, her life would tilt again. Curiosity and something far more dangerous pulled her forward. She slid into the car, the leather seat cool beneath her as Adrian watched her with unreadable calm. "I wasn't joking last night," he said, his voice low and sure. "I meant every word, marry me." Clara's heart lurched, anger flashing beneath her sorrow. "You can't expect me to throw myself into another marriage when mine ended in ruins only yesterday." Adrian leaned back, his gaze sharp as if cutting through her defenses. "I don't expect you to. But I offer you a chance to rebuild, to stand tall again, to prove to yourself and the world that Daniel's betrayal didn't break you. I'm not asking for love. I'm offering a partnership." "A contract," Clara whispered, bitterness on her tongue. "A choice," Adrian corrected softly. "One that benefits us both." She stared at him, confusion swirling with a reluctant flicker of intrigue. What could a man like Adrian possibly need from her? A millionaire with power and influence did not pick a woman left in ruins unless there was something more. Adrian must have read her doubt because he leaned closer, his voice carrying the hint of a secret. "There are forces circling me. Business rivals, family enemies, people who would exploit any weakness. Alone, I give them too much freedom. With you by my side, as my wife, I gain an armor they cannot penetrate." The intensity in his words made Clara's skin prickle. It was madness, yet there was logic hidden beneath it. Her pain, her humiliation suddenly transformed into something valuable, something he wanted at his side. "And what do I gain?" she asked, her voice barely steady. Adrian's eyes softened, the shadow of his own wounds flickering through. "Protection, freedom from the man who discarded you, and the chance to write a different story for yourself. I won't ask you to love me, only to stand with me." Clara turned her face toward the window, the city rushing by in streaks of neon light. Her heart screamed that she should refuse, yet another voice whispered of power, of control, of the chance to rise from the ashes Daniel left her in. The silence between them grew taut, heavy with suspense, until Adrian spoke again, his words laced with finality. "This is not a plea, Clara. It is an opportunity, and opportunities like this do not wait forever." She realized then that his offer was not just about saving her. There was something hidden beneath it, something darker and more dangerous that bound him to her in ways she had yet to uncover. The contract was not the end of her story. It was the beginning of a game where love, betrayal, and power would collide, and she was no longer just a victim, but a player thrown into the storm. The weeks that followed blurred into something Clara could barely comprehend. What had begun as a desperate conversation outside a restaurant had now become reality. She was Adrian Blackwell's wife, though not in the way little girls dreamed of. Their vows had been spoken quietly, away from family and friends, a legal bond sealed with the weight of secrets instead of romance. There was no wedding gown, no music, only a contract hidden beneath their signatures. And yet when Adrian looked at her across the table, there was a flicker in his eyes that made her wonder if the line between contract and something else was already fading. The world noticed. Their appearance together at a gala 2 weeks after their quiet union sent whispers rushing like wildfire through the city's social circles. Clara, once invisible beside Daniel, now stood in the spotlight beside a man who commanded every room he entered. She wore a gown Adrian had chosen, its silver fabric clinging to her like moonlight. Cameras flashed as they walked hand in hand into the ballroom, and for the first time Clara realized the danger and power of her new role. Daniel was there. His smirk vanished the moment he saw her step from the car with Adrian at her side. His lover clung to him, but Daniel's eyes burned with disbelief and fury. He had expected Clara to collapse in silence. He had not expected her to rise higher than before, and certainly not on the arm of the one man who could overshadow him completely. Clara felt Daniel's gaze follow her all evening, and though it made her stomach twist, she held her head high. Adrian stayed close, his hand resting at the small of her back, steady and protective. When Daniel finally approached, his voice carried venom. "This is how you choose to survive, clinging to another man's fortune." Before Clara could respond, Adrian stepped forward, his tone sharp as ice. "You fool. You may want to remember the difference between survival and evolution. She didn't cling to me. I chose her." The ballroom fell silent. Guests leaned in, hungry for scandal, as Adrian's words sliced through the air. Clara's breath caught, her heart pounding not only from the confrontation, but from the way he had said it. Chosen her, as if there was more truth in his claim than even she understood. Later that night, after the gala had ended and they returned to Adrian's penthouse, Clara confronted him. "Why did you say that? You make it sound like this is more than an arrangement." Adrian loosened his tie, his eyes shadowed with something deeper than she had ever seen. "Because I will not let him think you are anyone's discarded thing. You're not a pawn in his game. You're with me now. And when I claim something, Clara, I protect it." Her heart twisted at the intensity of his words. She wanted to believe it was only part of the performance, yet the way his hand lingered on hers as he passed by told her otherwise. That night, lying awake in the vast silence of Adrian's home, Clara realized the danger she was walking into was not only Daniel's wrath or the eyes of the world. The true danger was the spark beginning to burn in her chest whenever Adrian's gaze lingered too long. This was meant to be a contract, a partnership, a shield. But it was becoming something else, something terrifying, because the more she watched him, the more she saw the cracks in his armor, and in those cracks was a man capable of love so fierce it could either save her or destroy her completely. The suspense tightened around her life like a net. She was not sure who would strike first, Daniel, Adrian's hidden enemies, or her own heart betraying the deal she had sworn to keep. Clara walked through the marble halls of Adrian's penthouse, her heels echoing against the cold floors, each step weighed down by the memory of the gala. His words still pulsed in her mind. I chose her. They were supposed to be bound only by a contract, but Adrian's declaration had shaken the boundaries she had drawn around her heart. She could not deny the way her chest had tightened, the way her breath had caught when he said those words in front of Daniel. For the first time, she felt less like a shield and more like something he could truly want. Yet beneath the spark of longing, questions gnawed at her. Adrian was a man shrouded in secrets. His world was built on steel and shadows, and though he had given her a place at his side, he had never revealed the truth of his own scars. She sensed it when his gaze turned distant, when his jaw tightened at the mention of certain names, when his voice dropped with a weight that seemed carved out of grief. One night, unable to contain her curiosity, Clara found herself drawn to his study. The door was left ajar, a faint light spilling out. She stepped inside and saw him sitting at his desk, his hand wrapped around a glass of amber liquid, his eyes fixed on a photograph. He didn't notice her at first. His guard was down, the usual sharpness gone, replaced by a haunting sorrow. Clara's voice was soft. Who is she? Adrian stiffened, his head snapping up, but the photograph remained in his hand. It was of a young woman with a gentle smile, her face radiant with life. He set the frame down slowly, as though placing something fragile back on an altar. Her name was Evelyn. She was my fiancée. She died before we could marry. The pain in his voice pierced Clara's heart. For a long moment, silence stretched between them, filled with ghosts neither of them could see. She stepped closer, her voice trembling. Is that why you asked me to marry you so suddenly? Because you couldn't save her, and you wanted to save me instead. Adrian's eyes lifted, and in them she saw both fire and torment. Evelyn's death was a lesson. I trusted the wrong people. I let my enemies come too close, and she paid the price. His hand tightened into a fist, his knuckles white. When I saw you outside that restaurant, I saw the same kind of breaking that once stole her from me. I couldn't stand by and let it happen again. Clara's breath shuddered as the truth unfolded. His marriage proposal had not been madness or pity. It had been desperation, a vow to never repeat his mistake. Yet something deeper shimmered beneath his words, something he would not admit even to himself. Before she could speak, Adrian stood, his face once more hard with determination. But make no mistake, Clara. This arrangement is not about love, it is about strength. With you by my side, no one will dare to touch me again, or you. His words cut, yet the flicker in his eyes betrayed him. Clara felt it, the silent war he fought between his grief and the dangerous affection growing in his chest. She should have been afraid, but instead she felt her own heart pull toward him. As she left the study that night, she realized the stakes were far greater than she had imagined. Adrian was not only shielding her from Daniel's cruelty, he was shielding himself from the ghosts of his past. But the more Clara uncovered, the clearer it became that those ghosts were not finished with him. And if she stayed, they would soon become hers too. The storm came without warning. Clara had just begun to find a fragile rhythm in her new life, learning the contours of Adrian's guarded world, when Daniel returned like a shadow slipping under the door. It began with whispers in the newspapers, carefully planted stories about her sudden marriage to one of the city's most powerful men. They painted her as manipulative, a woman who traded loyalty for wealth, a woman who abandoned her husband only to climb higher. Clara recognized Daniel's hand in every poisonous word. The whispers grew louder at a charity event weeks later. Clara stood beside Adrian, her smile brittle as cameras flashed, when a journalist shouted across the crowd, "Is it true you left your husband to chase a fortune, Mrs. Blackwell?" The venom in the question drew gasps, and Clara's face burned as a dozen microphones pushed toward her. Adrian's arm tightened protectively around her waist, his glare silencing the room. He led her away without a word, but she felt the humiliation burrow deep into her skin. That night she confronted him. "This is Daniel's doing. He won't stop until I'm destroyed." Adrian paced the room, his anger barely contained. "Then let him try. I have enough power to bury him." But Clara shook her head. "That's what he wants, to drag us into a public war. If you fight him with power, he'll twist it into proof that I'm nothing but your puppet." For the first time, Adrian's certainty faltered. He turned toward her, his jaw tight. "Then what do you suggest?" She hesitated, her voice soft. "That we endure it. That we show the world we're more than his lies. If we stand together long enough, he'll expose himself." Adrian studied her, and though his eyes burned with fury, something like admiration flickered beneath. "You're stronger than you realize," he murmured. But strength could not shield her from betrayal when it came from the inside. Weeks later, as Clara prepared for another event, she overheard a conversation in Adrian's office. A voice she didn't recognize, low and insistent, spoke to him about Daniel. "She's a liability," the man said. "He's using her to get to you. The longer you keep her, the more you risk. End this arrangement before it costs you everything." Clara froze outside the door, her heart shattering at the suggestion. Worse still was Adrian's silence, heavy and unreadable. Did he agree? Did he regret choosing her? Did he still see her as nothing more than a shield against his enemies? She stumbled back, unnoticed, her breath ragged. Doubt clawed at her, fierce and unrelenting. She wanted to believe Adrian's words, the way he defended her, the way his touch lingered when no one else was watching. But the ghosts of his past and the venom of Daniel's lies wrapped around her until she could no longer tell if what they shared was real or only illusion. That night, lying in the vast emptiness of their home, Clara whispered into the dark, "Am I just another mistake you're trying to fix, Adrian, or am I something more?" No answer came, only the restless silence of a man haunted by too many secrets. The suspense tightened around them, the kind that warned of a storm far greater than Daniel's schemes. Clara could feel it pressing in, the moment when truth would shatter every fragile thread holding them together. The night of the Foundation Gala should have been Clara's chance to silence the whispers, to step out from Daniel's shadow once and for all. She wore a crimson gown that shimmered like fire under the lights, her hand tucked into Adrian's as they entered the grand ballroom. Yet beneath the glittering chandeliers, danger was waiting. She could feel it in the air, a tension too sharp to ignore. Daniel was there, of course, dressed in smug arrogance, his new lover dangling from his arm like a trophy. His eyes tracked Clara with poisonous hunger, and she knew he hadn't come simply to gloat. He came to destroy. Halfway through the evening, a commotion spread through the crowd. A journalist stepped forward with a stack of documents, his voice cutting through the music. "Mrs. Blackwell," he called, "care to explain these bank records showing payments you received before your marriage to Adrian Blackwell?" Gasps rippled across the room. Clara's face went pale. She had never seen those papers in her life. Yet the figures were damning, painting her as a woman who had been secretly paid to betray one husband and trap another. She turned to Adrian, desperate for his eyes, but his face was carved from stone, unreadable. Daniel stepped forward with perfect timing, his voice dripping with mock sympathy. "I warned you, Adrian. She's clever, but clever isn't the same as faithful. She's been playing you both all along." The crowd murmured, the once admiring eyes now sharp with suspicion. Clara's throat burned as she tried to speak. "These are lies. I never—" But Adrian's silence cut deeper than Daniel's words. He didn't defend her. He didn't shield her. He simply stared, his jaw locked, his knuckles white as though the weight of doubt had finally tipped the scales. Clara's heart broke in that moment. The man who had promised to protect her, who had whispered vows not of love but of loyalty, was now questioning her truth. She felt the walls closing in, the room shrinking as gossip spread like wildfire. "I can't do this," she whispered, pulling away from Adrian's grasp. Her voice trembled but carried enough strength to still the crowd. If you can believe him so easily, then there is nothing left between us. She left the ballroom with her head high, though her heart felt as if it had shattered into pieces too small to gather. The cold night air hit her cheeks, mingling with the hot sting of her tears. She had chosen to walk away from Daniel's cruelty. She had chosen to risk everything on Adrian's promise. And now, with a single moment of silence, he had abandoned her too. Inside the ballroom, Adrian remained motionless, the forged documents still in his hand. But beneath his icy mask, something darker stirred. He had seen the numbers. He had felt the sting of betrayal before, and now it pressed against him again like a reopened wound. Yet deep down, another voice whispered, insistent and merciless. What if she was telling the truth? What if Daniel had just played his deadliest card? The night did not end with applause or triumph. It ended with Clara vanishing into the darkness, Adrian torn between doubt and desire, and Daniel smiling like a man who believed he had finally won. The game was no longer just about pride. It had become a war, and Clara stood at the center of it, more alone than ever before. Rain hammered the city that night, as if the heavens themselves wanted to wash away the lies. Adrian sat alone in his study. The forged documents spread across his desk like poison. Every instinct screamed at him to believe Clara, to trust the fire in her eyes when she swore those numbers were false. But the ghosts of his past clawed at him. Evelyn had been lost because he trusted too easily. Could he survive another betrayal? His phone buzzed, pulling him from the storm in his mind. A message from one of his investigators. The truth was waiting. Adrian's eyes narrowed as he scanned the report. The payments were real, but not to Clara. The accounts were traced back to Daniel, who had orchestrated everything with a skill that made Adrian's blood run cold. Clara was innocent. He had doubted her when she needed him most. For the first time in years, Adrian felt fear. Not for himself, but for her. Because Clara had walked into the night alone, carrying her heartbreak like an open wound, and Daniel knew exactly how to strike when she was weakest. Meanwhile, Clara wandered through the rain-soaked streets, her dress clinging to her skin, her heels clicking against the pavement with every determined step. She didn't know where she was going, only that she couldn't stay. Adrian's silence had broken something inside her that Daniel's cruelty never could. She had trusted him, and he had let doubt steal everything from her. A black car slowed beside her, its window rolling down. Daniel's voice slithered into the night. "Clara, get in. You don't belong in his world. You never did." She froze, her pulse racing. For a fleeting second she almost believed him, almost gave in to the exhaustion weighing her down. But then she saw the satisfaction in his smirk, the hunger to control her all over again. She stepped back, shaking her head. "I would rather drown in this storm than crawl back. Cut to you." Daniel's smile faltered, replaced by something darker. The car door opened, and two men stepped out, their intentions clear in the way their eyes glinted. Clara's chest tightened with panic, but before fear could consume her, a second set of headlights cut through the rain. Adrian's car screeched to a halt, and he emerged like a shadow made flesh, his fury burning hotter than the storm. "Touch her," Adrian warned, his voice carrying through the thunder, "and you will not see another sunrise." The men hesitated, glancing back at Daniel, but the venom in Adrian's eyes was more dangerous than any order their master could give. Daniel cursed under his breath, retreating into his car, his promise lingering in the air. This isn't over. When the car sped away, Clara stood trembling, her tears indistinguishable from the rain. Adrian approached slowly, as if afraid she would vanish. He removed his jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders, his hands lingering with desperation. "I was wrong," he said, his voice breaking in a way she had never heard before. "Daniel forged everything. I should have believed you. I should have fought for you. Don't leave me, Clara. Not like this." Her heart ached, torn between love and the sharp sting of betrayal. "You doubted me when I needed you most. How do I trust you again?" Adrian stepped closer, his forehead against hers, his words fierce and trembling. "Because I will spend every breath proving I'll never doubt you again. because losing you would be the one mistake I could never survive. The storm roared around them, the city alive with chaos, but in that moment, Clara felt something stronger than fear. She felt the raw truth in his voice, the desperate plea of a man who had finally chosen not power, not control, but love. Yet deep in her chest, a question lingered like a blade. Could love truly shield them from the darkness Daniel was determined to unleash, or was this only the calm before the deadliest strike yet? The storm had passed by morning, but the silence it left behind was heavier than thunder. Clara sat at the window of Adrian's penthouse, wrapped in his jacket, her eyes tracing the gray horizon. Sleep had not come. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Daniel's smirk, Adrian's doubt, and her own heart breaking again and again. She heard footsteps behind her, steady and deliberate, and she knew it was Adrian before he spoke. "I called an emergency board meeting today," he said quietly. "Daniel won't be able to hide behind lies anymore. I'll expose him in front of the very people who gave him power." Clara turned, her eyes sharp with exhaustion. "And what about me, Adrian? What about the way you exposed me when you didn't believe in me?" His jaw tightened. He knelt in front of her, his voice low but fierce. "I cannot undo the moment I failed you, but I can spend every moment after proving I will never fail you again." Later that day, the boardroom buzzed with tension. Powerful men and women filled the long table, curious and hungry for scandal. Daniel strutted in with arrogance, a folder tucked under his arm, prepared to bury Clara once and for all. But Adrian was already there, standing tall with a stack of documents that glinted like weapons. Clara sat at his side, her heart pounding. The meeting began with Daniel's smug voice. "You've all seen the headlines. Adrian Blackwell has married a fraud. Clara used him the same way she used me. Do you want a man this blinded to lead you?" He spread his papers across the table, confident in his performance, but Adrian's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Lies have a short life, Daniel. Yours ends today." One by one, Adrian laid out the evidence: bank transfers, phone records, testimony from investigators. Every page tore Daniel's story apart. The payments that supposedly proved Clara's betrayal were traced directly to Daniel's own accounts. He had orchestrated everything, manipulating media and allies, desperate to destroy Clara and Adrian both. The board members shifted uneasily, their eyes turning from Daniel to Clara. She met their gaze with steady calm, refusing to bow her head. For the first time, she wasn't the victim in the shadows. She was the woman standing tall in the storm. Daniel's face twisted with fury. He lunged across the table, his hand slamming against the wood. "You think this changes anything? She was mine first. She'll always be mine." Before anyone could move, Adrian was there, gripping Daniel's arm with crushing force. His voice was low, deadly quiet. "She was never yours. She was only chained by your cruelty. And today, I cut those chains forever." Security dragged Daniel from the room, his threats echoing down the hall, but they sounded hollow now. His empire had crumbled in minutes. Silence fell. Adrian turned to Clara, his eyes not the cold mask of the powerful man the world knew, but the raw gaze of a man stripped bare. He stepped closer, the entire board watching, and took her trembling hands in his. "This started as a contract," he said, his voice breaking, "but somewhere along the way, you became my reason to fight. My reason to breathe. Clara, I love you, not as a shield, not as a symbol, but as the only woman who has ever broken through my walls. Will you marry me again this time, not for convenience, but for forever?" Tears spilled down Clara's cheeks, but they weren't from heartbreak anymore. She whispered through trembling lips, "Yes, this time for love." The boardroom erupted in murmurs, but none of it mattered. In that moment, the world around them disappeared. Adrian pulled her into his arms, and for the first time in years, she felt safe, truly safe. Later that night, under the quiet glow of the city lights, Clara stood with Adrian on the balcony of their home. She thought of her birthday, of the moment Daniel shattered her, of the stranger who whispered a wild proposal through her tears. She thought of the battles that nearly broke them and the love that finally saved them. Adrian pressed a kiss to her forehead, his arms tightening around her. You were never broken, Clara. You were only waiting for someone to see you. She smiled through her tears, resting against him. The pain of the past was not erased, but it no longer defined her. Her story had not ended with betrayal. It had ended here, with love that rose from the ruins, fierce and unshakable. And though shadows still lingered in the world beyond their walls, Clara knew one truth with absolute certainty. She was no longer the woman crying alone on her birthday. She was the woman chosen, cherished, and finally free.